We live in a world where it's easier than ever to point fingers. It's always someone else's fault. It's the job, the partner, the system, the way we were raised, the economy, the noise out there is deafening. And in that chaos, we've forgotten to pause and look inward. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. If your life keeps falling apart the same way, at some point, it's not about what's happening to you, it's about what's happening within you. People don't avoid the truth because they're weak. They avoid it because it's heavy. It's uncomfortable. It asks us to take off our masks, to step into the mirror and ask the question, what am I not facing in myself? That's not easy, but it is necessary, because the longer you avoid it, the higher the price you pay. There's a cost to ignoring your own mess. A hidden tax you keep paying even when you can't see the invoice. It shows up in your relationships when the same arguments keep happening. It shows up in your work when your job changes, but your dissatisfaction doesn't. It shows up in your health, your sleep, your self-worth. It's not random, it's repetition. And repetition is always trying to teach you something you haven't yet learned. Here's the catch. You can't fix what you won't face. And the longer you delay the confrontation with yourself, the harder the climb becomes. You don't suddenly wake up one day broken. It's quiet, it's slow, it's small compromises compounded over time. It's the way you ignore the gut feeling, the way you silence your own voice to please others, the way you distract yourself with noise because silence is where the truth lives. And silence terrifies you. We don't grow when we're busy avoiding ourselves. But when we do the work, when we stop running and finally sit with our own reflection, we begin to see patterns, not just problems. We start to realize that the same challenges keep showing up, not because we're cursed, but because we haven't yet evolved beyond the mindset that created them. Life will repeat the lesson until we learn it. So ask yourself, what have you been avoiding? What story do you keep telling that keeps you safe but stuck? I'm just not a morning person. That's just the way I am. I've always struggled with that. We call it personality, but often it's just conditioning. Patterns we've accepted as identity. But identity can be reshaped. Growth begins when you stop defending your dysfunction and start dismantling it. Most people wait for a rock bottom moment to change. A breakdown. A crisis. Something that shakes them so hard they're forced to stop. But what if you didn't have to hit bottom? What if awareness could be your wake-up call? What if the whisper was enough before the scream ever came? The people who transform, the ones who build meaningful, fulfilling lives, aren't the ones who had it easy. They're the ones who got honest. Honest about their patterns. Honest about their role in the chaos. Honest about how long they've been pretending that they're fine. Pretending is expensive. Every day you spend avoiding the truth is a day you could have spent changing it, and time is the one currency you can never earn back. So the question becomes, why wait? Why wait until it's too late, until you've lost the relationship, burned the bridge, hurt the people you love, missed the opportunity? Let another year pass saying, next year I'll get serious. Why do we keep choosing delay over discomfort? The answer is fear. But not fear of failure, fear of responsibility. Because once you realize it's on you, you can't unsee it. It's easier to believe someone else is the problem. That way, you don't have to change. But that illusion is a cage. And the longer you stay in it, the more you convince yourself that freedom isn't possible. But it is. You don't need a dramatic breakthrough, you just need a decision. The decision to stop avoiding. To start asking harder questions, not what's wrong with them, but what's unresolved in me. Not why do people treat me this way, but what have I been tolerating that I no longer need to? Every meaningful transformation begins with a moment like that, a moment when you say, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to stay on this loop. That's when the healing begins. That's when the repair starts. That's when you begin to rebuild not just your habits, but your sense of self. And here's the beautiful part. When you start doing the inner work, your outer world begins to shift too. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You see things differently. You hold your boundaries. You stop settling for chaos. You stop begging for love you haven't given to yourself. Fixing yourself isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about being awake in your own life. About taking back the pen and writing a story you're proud to live. So if you're tired of the same cycles, the same pain, the same excuses, then maybe it's time to stop outsourcing your responsibility. Time to look in the mirror and say, this ends with me. You are not broken. You are becoming. But becoming something better always begins with letting go of what no longer serves you. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until life forces you to change. Choose to change now because you chose it. That's the beginning of real power. That's where your transformation starts. Not tomorrow, today. There's something subtle but deeply damaging that happens when people begin the journey of self-improvement. They confuse accountability with self-judgment. They think that owning their flaws means labeling themselves as flawed, that being honest about their mistakes means they are broken. But that's not how growth works. That's not how real change happens. When did we decide that admitting weakness meant being weak? That facing the truth meant punishing ourselves for it? It's a narrative we've quietly absorbed. We carry this belief that if we're not perfect, then we're not enough. And because of that, we spend so much time hiding our faults instead of healing them. We shame ourselves into silence instead of challenging ourselves into strength. But let's get something clear. Being accountable is not about beating yourself up. It's about stepping into your life with both eyes open. It's about owning your story, not just the highlight reel, but the messy middle too. It's the difference between saying I'm a failure and saying I failed and here's what I learned. See, we live in a culture obsessed with performance, metrics, results. We measure ourselves by the outcome, but growth isn't always visible. Sometimes growth is just the courage to admit that something has to change. Sometimes it's choosing to be honest even when no one's watching. Sometimes it's saying, I made that mess, not so you can wallow in it, but so you can begin to clean it up. You are not your mistakes, but you are responsible for what you do next. That's where the power is. That's where everything shifts, from blame to ownership, from guilt to growth, from who you were to who you're becoming. The most powerful people I've met don't pretend they have it all figured out. In fact, they're often the first ones to say, here's where I went wrong. And they don't say it with shame, they say it with clarity, because they know that responsibility isn't a burden, it's a bridge. A bridge between who you are and who you want to be. But let me tell you why most people avoid this kind of radical honesty. It's uncomfortable. It's easier to judge ourselves than to hold ourselves. It's easier to say I always screw things up than to ask what needs to change so I stop doing that. One creates guilt, the other creates direction. We've been taught that perfection earns love. That if we're just good enough, we'll be worthy, so we try to clean up our image, polish the surface, hide the crack. But real connection, the kind that heals you, the kind that builds something lasting, comes from the opposite. It comes from vulnerability, from showing up as you are, flaws and all, and still choosing to do better. Accountability really is, it's not about being perfect, it's about being responsible. Not for everything that's ever happened to you, but for how you respond, for how you grow, for how you rise after you fall. And that's a hard truth to sit with sometimes. Because accountability means giving up the illusion of control over others and taking full ownership of your choices. It means saying, I can't control what they did, but I can control how I react. That's not easy, that's not glamorous, but that's real leadership. Not in the corporate sense, in the human sense. Leading your own life. Taking the wheel instead of blaming the road. But we have to be careful here, because if we don't draw the line between accountability and judgment, we can get stuck. You've seen it, maybe you've lived it. People who are trying to change, but every time they slip, they beat themselves up so badly they lose momentum. They say things like, I knew I couldn't do it, or this is just who I am. And before long, they're back to square one, not because they couldn't grow, but because they never gave themselves permission to stumble. Growth is not a straight line. It's messy, it's full of missteps. And accountability, when it's healthy, says, I stumbled, but I'm still walking. It says, I missed the mark, but I'm still aiming. Judgment says you're not enough. Accountability says you're evolving. And when you start holding yourself accountable from that place, not from fear, but from compassion, something amazing happens. You stop running from the truth because it no longer scares you. You stop hiding your imperfections because they're no longer something to be ashamed of. You start embracing the process because you see that every failure contains feedback. Every mistake carries a lesson. Every moment of weakness is an invitation to build strength. Think about it like this. If someone you love makes a mistake, how do you respond? Do you shame them, reject them, call them a failure, or do you say, that was a mistake, but I know you can do better? Now ask yourself, why don't you offer that same grace to yourself? Self-accountability works when it's rooted in love. Love for your future. Love for your growth. Love for the version of you that's trying, even when it's hard. That's not soft, that's strength. That's the kind of accountability that transforms people, that builds trust, that creates lasting change. So if you're on this path, if you're trying to improve, trying to grow, trying to fix what's been broken, don't make the mistake of thinking it has to be painful to be powerful. Don't let guilt be your fuel, let clarity be your compass, let grace be your guide. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be responsible. Not to prove your worth, but because you already are. That's the kind of accountability that changes lives, starting with yours. There's a lie we've been sold. One that's subtle, quiet, but powerful. It's the idea that discipline is about control, about rigid schedules, about pushing harder and doing more. And for a long time, people bought into that version of it. They looked at discipline as punishment, as a cold and calculated means to an end. But that's not what discipline really is. Not when it matters, not when it lasts. Discipline isn't about controlling yourself, it's about honoring yourself. Think about it. What do you do when you truly care about someone? You show up for them. You keep your word. You protect them from harm, even when they don't see it coming. You stay consistent even when it's hard. You sacrifice the immediate for the sake of the meaningful. That's love. That's commitment. That's discipline. So the question is, why don't we offer ourselves that same kind of care? We talk about wanting to be better, healthier, more focused, more present. But wanting doesn't get you anywhere without doing. And doing without discipline is just a burst of hope that dies the moment things get uncomfortable. But when you respect yourself, and truly respect yourself, you stop abandoning your goals every time your mood changes. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop looking for motivation and start honoring your commitment. Discipline is not what you do when you feel like it. It's what you choose to do because you decided your future is worth it. It's easy to act in alignment with your best self when everything is going your way, when you're well rested, when life is convenient. But the real test of character happens in the small, ordinary moments, the early mornings, the quiet sacrifices, the choice to say no to the thing you want now so you can say yes to the life you want later. That's the difference between people who change and people who wish. Wishing is passive, discipline is active. It's not the loud, dramatic gesture. It's not the all or nothing push. It's the quiet promise kept day after day, long after the feeling is gone. Some people look at discipline and think it's restrictive, but the truth is, it's freeing. Because when you're disciplined, you're not a slave to your impulses. You're not constantly being dragged around by your emotions, chasing comfort, avoiding effort. You're grounded, you're steady, you're building something, not just reacting to everything. And it's not about becoming robotic, it's about becoming reliable to yourself. It's about being the kind of person you can count on, especially when no one's watching. That's the part people forget. Self-respect doesn't come from affirmations. It comes from evidence. It comes from doing hard things and proving to yourself that you're capable. Every time you follow through on a promise you made to yourself, even when it's inconvenient, you build trust. Not with the world, with you. And when you trust yourself, you stop looking for shortcuts. You stop needing validation. You stop chasing easy because you've already decided to chase excellence. But let's be clear, discipline doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean never missing a step. It means that when you fall, you get back up without letting shame take the wheel. It means learning the rhythm of resilience, not rigidity. I've seen people with all the talent in the world waste their potential because they lack discipline. And I've seen people with average skill build extraordinary lives because they were willing to show up every single day. Talent might give you a head start, but it's discipline that keeps you in the race. The most successful people, whether in business, art, relationships, or life, they're not superhuman. They're just consistent. They decided that their goals were not up for negotiation. That's it. They made the decision once, and then they honored that decision 1,000 times after that. That's where self-respect lives. In the repetition, in the small, often unseen moments of integrity. Waking up when you said you would. Saying no when it would be easier to say yes. Choosing alignment over approval. Choosing growth over comfort. We live in a world that celebrates speed and highlights. Everyone wants results fast. Everyone wants transformation overnight. But anything worth building takes time. Anything worth becoming requires patience. Discipline isn't just a tool for progress. It's a practice of patience. It says, I may not be there yet, but I'm committed to the journey. There's dignity in that. There's pride in that. Because discipline, at its core, is about choosing to be better, not because someone else expects it from you, but because you expect it from yourself. Not because the world is watching, but because you are. And here's something you don't hear often enough. Discipline is a form of kindness. Not the soft, feel-good kind, but the hard, honest kind. The kind that says, I love you too much to let you stay where you are. The kind that calls you forward, that holds you accountable, that believes in your potential even when you forget. So if you're tired of starting over, tired of breaking promises to yourself, tired of wondering why nothing's changing, maybe it's time to stop chasing quick fixes. Maybe it's time to stop negotiating with your goals. Maybe it's time to choose discipline, not as a punishment, but as an act of self-respect. Because every time you choose discipline, you're telling yourself, I matter. My future matters. My integrity matters. My life is worth the effort. And that belief, that quiet, steady, unshakable belief, is how everything changes. Not in a flash, but in a choice, repeated every day. That's not control, that's love. There's something that isn't talked about enough when it comes to personal growth, not because it's not important, but because it's uncomfortable. We talk about goals, we talk about discipline, we talk about performance, but very few people talk about the weight we're carrying while trying to do all of that. I'm not talking about physical weight, I'm talking about emotional weight. The kind you don't see, but you feel in your chest, in your decisions, in the way you hold yourself back without even realizing it. We all carry something, a story, a wound, a belief, a regret. Maybe it's a childhood that left you doubting your worth. Maybe it's a betrayal you never fully processed. Maybe it's the shame of a failure you've kept hidden. Whatever it is, we tuck it into the background and convince ourselves it's no big deal. We push forward, telling ourselves to be strong, to move on, to just get over it. But what we don't realize is that nothing slows a person down more than what they refuse to face. You can't outrun emotional baggage. It shows up in ways that don't always look like pain. It looks like procrastination. It looks like perfectionism. It looks like overworking or shutting down. It looks like anger in conversations that don't deserve it, or silence in moments that need your voice. And then we wonder why we feel stuck, why we can't move forward, even when we're trying so hard. The truth is, it's hard to move forward when something inside you is still holding on to the past. We've been conditioned to believe that strength means being unaffected, that growth means leaving the past behind and never looking back. But healing doesn't happen by erasing. It happens by integrating, by facing what hurt you, but to release it, to stop letting it quietly influence your decisions, your relationships, your belief in what's possible. Think of it this way. If you were going on a long journey, would you pack your suitcase with bricks? Would you weigh yourself down with things that no longer serve you? Of course not. But that's what we do emotionally. We carry old pain into new seasons. We carry guilt into fresh starts. We carry resentment into relationships and wonder why we can't connect. Sometimes the hardest part of moving forward isn't the work ahead. It's the baggage we refuse to leave behind. But I get it. Letting go sounds easy until you actually try to do it. Until you realize that part of you is still angry, still hurt, still scared. And that's okay. That's human. What matters isn't how fast you process it, but whether you're willing to. Because emotional baggage isn't just about what happened to you, but it's also about the meaning you attached to it. That failure wasn't just a loss, it became a belief that you're not good enough. That heartbreak wasn't just pain, it became a fear that no one can be trusted. That mistake wasn't just a decision, it became a story that you're a screw-up. And here's the thing about stories, if you tell them long enough, you start living them, even when they no longer reflect the person you're trying to become. So the question isn't, what happened to you? The question is, what have you been carrying that no longer belongs to you? Growth demands a trade-off. You cannot become the best version of yourself while clinging to the stories that were built in your worst seasons. You cannot build something strong on a foundation that's cracked with unhealed pain. That's why the real work isn't just setting goals. It's checking your bags. It's asking yourself, what am I holding on to that's slowing me down? It could be shame, it could be blame, it could be the fear of repeating the past, whatever it is. Naming it is the first step. Because you can't let go of what you refuse to admit is there. And I want to make this clear. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't matter. It means acknowledging it with honesty and deciding that it no longer gets to define you. It means giving yourself the permission to evolve beyond it. To say, yes, that happened, but I'm not living there anymore. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet are not the ones who have avoided pain. They're the ones who faced it, processed it, and still chose to move forward. They're not carrying the old weight. They did the work to unpack it. They asked the hard questions. They had the hard conversations with others and with themselves. And because of that, they're lighter, more present, more free. That kind of freedom isn't luck. It's intention. It's work. But it's the kind of work that pays dividends every day of your life. Because when you stop dragging the past behind you, your energy changes, your relationships change, your decisions change. You begin to act from clarity, not fear, from wisdom, not wounds. The world doesn't need more people who are pretending they're fine while silently crumbling inside. It needs people who are willing to do the hard internal work, who are brave enough to heal, who understand that emotional baggage doesn't make you weak, but refusing to deal with it will. So if you're feeling stuck, if you keep trying to go forward but life keeps pulling you back, maybe it's not about trying harder. Maybe it's about going deeper. Maybe what's slowing you down isn't a lack of ambition. It's the weight of something you were never meant to carry forever. It's time to open the suitcase, to unpack the pain, to sort through what still serves you and what it's time to let go of. Because you deserve to run your race unburdened. You deserve to create your future without dragging every shadow of your past behind you. Not because you're broken, but because you're finally ready to be whole. There's a phrase we've all said, sometimes without even realizing the weight behind it, I'll start tomorrow. It sounds harmless, hopeful even. But if you say it enough times, you wake up one day and realize you've been saying it for years, that tomorrow became next week, and next week became next year, and now you're staring at a life that feels like a series of missed chances dressed up as good intentions. It's not too late. That's the truth. But it will be if you keep waiting. Time doesn't stop for anyone, not for your fear, not for your comfort, not for your indecision. Every second you spend waiting is a second you'll never get back. And yet we live as if time is an endless resource, as if the window will stay open until we're ready to crawl through it. But windows close. Opportunities pass. And the longer you wait to act on your potential, the more that inaction becomes your habit. What's dangerous isn't failing, it's postponing. Because every time you delay the work you know you need to do, you reinforce the belief that you're not ready, or worse, that it doesn't really matter. And that lie, if left unchallenged, becomes your truth. We all have dreams, ideas, visions of who we want to be. But the dream doesn't die because you weren't good enough. It dies because you never began. You never made the uncomfortable decision. You never took the risk. You never had the hard conversation. And slowly the dream fades. Not with a bang, but with a quiet surrender disguised as logic. We say things like, it's not the right time, but what we often mean is, I'm not ready to be uncomfortable. Because change is uncomfortable. Growth is inconvenient. It asks you to move before you feel fully prepared. But what if that's the point? What if readiness isn't a prerequisite, it's a result? What if you don't become ready before you act, but because you acted? The people who change their lives aren't the ones who had it all figured out. They're the ones who decided to stop letting time slip away while they waited for clarity. They were scared too. They were unsure too. But they chose to act anyway. Not because they were fearless, but because their future mattered more than their fear. And that's the choice in front of you right now. You can keep waiting, keep telling yourself the timing isn't perfect. Or you can take the first step and trust that clarity will meet you along the way. You don't have to leap all at once. Just take a step. Forward motion is forward motion. The smallest action is still more powerful than the biggest intention. Stop measuring your life by how much you want and start measuring it by how much you're willing to move. Because here's what people don't always realize. Waiting isn't neutral, it comes with a cost. Every time you choose not to grow, not to heal, not to act, you're reinforcing the habits, the patterns, the identity you say you're trying to change. You're training yourself to settle. You're teaching your future self that dreams are optional. That the version of you trapped in regret and mediocrity is somehow acceptable. That's the real danger of delay. It doesn't just cost you time, it costs you belief. I've met too many people who aren't where they want to be, not because they lack talent or resources or intelligence, but because they lacked urgency. They convinced themselves that there would always be more time. But more time isn't guaranteed. The window doesn't wait. Life moves. Whether you're ready or not. So if you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Not because today is special, but because you are. Because the fact that you're still thinking about the thing you want, still dreaming about the person you could become, that's evidence that it matters. That something inside you knows you're capable of more. That your future is calling and it's not going to wait forever. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need the full plan. You don't need approval from everyone around you. What you need is a decision, a commitment, a willingness to start without having all the answers. People think the scariest part is taking the leap, but the real fear should be looking back 5, 10, 20 years from now and realizing you played it safe the whole time. That you stayed small, not because you had to, but because you chose to. That the life you wanted was always possible, you just never reached for it. It's not too late. That's the truth. Not yet, but one day it will be. The conversation you've been avoiding, one day you won't have the chance to have it. The person you want to become, one day that window will close, not because it's impossible, but because life moved on and you didn't. Because you stood still while time kept walking. This is your life. No one is coming to do it for you. No one is coming to hand you courage. You have to choose it. You have to choose you. Not once, but every single day. So stop negotiating with your future. Stop waiting for a version of you that feels more confident, more ready, more perfect. That person doesn't just show up. You build them. You build them in the discomfort, in the effort, in the decision to act now. Today is not too late. But it will be if you let it pass.